This is the Germans from Russia Experience, Episode 7. Bonus, Christmas in the Germans from Russia community.
My name is Franklin Deal, and I was born in Fresno, and I was a member. My parents were members of the Cross Church, also my grandparents. And what we used to have to do at Christmas time, we would go to the Christmas Eve church service, and all of the kids had a piece. Some of us had one or two pieces, and we had to say these pieces in front of the entire congregation. And there was usually a full house, upstairs and downstairs, and your aunts and uncles and all your relatives were there. Then after the church service, they would give us a bag of goodies, a banana, an apple, a pear, dried peaches, raisins, and you take that home, and cookies, animal cookies. And you go home, and when you got to your house, your aunts and uncles and parents were there, and all the kids had to say their piece again. Once we got that complete, then Santa Claus would come. My mother had a Santa Claus uniform, and one of my older cousins would be dressed up as Santa Claus, and we wouldn't know which one it was. And then after you said your pieces, Santa Claus would come and they would give you one or two presents. We didn't have 10 or 15 like they have now. That was how we celebrated Christmas. And then after you did that, you had a meal, and Grandma cooked it on a wood stove. And the wood stove was not fired with gas or electricity. It was a stove that she burned vine stumps. And everything came out, the broda, the noodle soup, whatever you had, the sausage, the potato salad, the macaroni salad, all came out at the same time. I don't know how she did that. There was no piecemeal where 10 minutes later you'd get one thing, and 10 minutes later it all came out at the same time. That was Christmas.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Welcome to the Germans from Russia Experience. What a treat that was. Thank you, Franklin, for the first-hand account of your memories of Christmas in the Volga German community in Fresno in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. I am Alisa, your host, and today I will be sharing about the traditions surrounding Christmas, in specifically the Lutheran Church of the Volga Germans, since that is what I know as I lived it. Weihnachten, Christmas, was the most eagerly anticipated religious and social festival in Volga villages. It was a time to observe old traditions from the German homeland that became influenced by the environment on the lower Volga. Advent marked the official beginning of the season and the church year. It began on the fourth Sunday before December 25th. The weather in December was cold, similar to the upper Midwest of the United States. A white Christmas was not rare. Even though the weather was cold, people cleaned their yards by removing items that may dampen the seasonal spirit. They also swept inside and out, even the dirt in front of their houses. It is said that the men would have to leave their homes when the women began cleaning frantically. They called them Lappenvolk, or dust rag people, as the women would transform into these cleaning machines or cleaning devils. Within the home, the nicest clothing would be readied and shoes and boots would be polished. After the cleaning, decorating would begin. Evergreens had been abundant in the homeland. However, there was not much green around the steppe along the Volga River. Nonetheless, the colonists would bring in any greens that they could find to decorate their home. It could be wheat sprouts, barley, branches of lilac, cherries, or cornel, which is similar to dogwood. Inside the warmth, these branches may bloom to add holiday color. If they didn't bloom, paper flowers or color paper chains might be added to hang on the branches. Then it was time to prepare the holiday foods. There would be cookies and pastries, along with other special foods. With all the traditions, there was also superstition. It was believed that if a family was baking bread, they needed to bake a loaf for the pets. If the loaf was not prepared for the pets, then the family would have bad luck. The men would carve small wooden toys, and the women would sew, knit, or crochet items for their children. While the parents were working so hard to prepare for the holidays, the children would be minded by their grandmothers, who would teach them traditional Christmas songs to be ready for the Christmas services. During the evening of the Advent Sunday, there would be excessive noise making outside. A group of young men would travel up and down the streets, blowing whistles, rattling chains, ringing cowbells, and making as much noise as they could to bring in the holiday. This group of young men would be led by a large, black, shaggy figure, Pelsnickel or Belsnickel. This tradition came from the homeland areas of Germany, where many Volga Germans originated from. Pelsnickel would be seeking out the naughty boys of the village. All year long, parents would warn their children to behave, or the Pelsnickel would come to get them. This feared character wore a large, furry coat that was stuffed with paper to make him appear larger. He had a ragged beard and large fur hat. He wore a chain around his waist and carried a sack in one hand full of switches. He may go into a home to confront the bad boys. Some children would scurry under tables and beds. Pelsnickel would call them out and seek them to confess their bad deeds or recite Bible verses. The children would answer the questions and make the promise to obey their parents and study hard in school. Only then would the Pelsnickel put away his switches and make his way back into the dark of the night. There were 3 main days of Christmas celebrations. During this time, there were no chores except for caring for animals. On Christmas Eve, Heiligabend, a big lunch would be served. After the meal, the children would get ready for the evening service. The church bells would ring at 4 p.m., and the children would rush to the church, where they would be greeted by a large Christmas tree, filled with decorated and lighted candles that illuminated everything else on the tree, such as crescents, stars, animals, bells, and other handmade objects. Baked cookies shaped like stars, animals, and other familiar objects were also used to trim the tree, along with fruits that had been kept in the cellar. The schoolmaster would direct the children to perform the pageant of songs, poems, and verses about the birth of Christ. After the service, the children would even receive a small gift from under the tree, a sack filled with gingerbreads and paper-wrapped candies. The streets may be lit with torches and barrels of burning kerosene so they could see their way home. Next, it was the adults' turn to come to church at 7 p.m. Again, the bells would ring to welcome them. They wore their finest clothes and carried their hymnals. A few adults stayed behind with the children. Observing the giant Christmas tree, the adults may reflect on their year of hard work and thank God for all He provided. After the adult service, they returned home to their children, who were eagerly awaiting the arrival of Christkind, or the Christ child. This character was played by a young girl with a sweet voice, who wore a white dress and veil over her face to conceal her identity. She held a candle in one hand. She would be followed by other young ladies in the village. They would approach a house and peer into the windows as they rang bells to get the attention of those inside. Candles from the inside illuminated their faces, and the girl would ask, "May the Christ child come in?" The lady of the house would answer, "Come in, child." Upon entering the home, the group would go quickly to the kitchen, where the lady would give them an apron full of cookies to take to the children in another room of the house. The children would say, "Christkind, liebes Herz, was hast du unter deinem Schers?" Christ child, oh dear Christ child, what gifts do you have under your apron for us? The Christ child would question the children to ask if they had obeyed their parents, studied hard, and learned their Bible lessons. When these questions were answered to her satisfaction, each child was given the cookies and other small gifts prepared by their parents. Then the group would move on to the next house. It should be noted that the Christkind was not intended to represent the Christ child, literally, but was more like a good fairy of the type found in old Germanic tales. Christmas morning began with a special meal that included Streuselkuchen, Pfeffernüsschen, and other holiday treats. There would be another adult service about 9 a.m. The story of the birth of Christ was shared, and more Christmas songs were sung from the hymnal. The people sang with all their hearts and with great enthusiasm. A traditional Volga German Christmas song was Es ist ein Ros unstrugen, Lo, how a rose erblooming, written in 1599. Stille Nacht was written after the German migration to the Volga region between 1764 and 1766. While the adults worshipped, the children would play outside in the snow. Later, another big meal was served. Adults did not exchange gifts. The children would take cookies to their godparents. Families would visit other families and friends. The young ladies may gather in one home to visit, while the young men would gather together to make themselves known by passing by the home where the young ladies sat. Some older groups of people would go house to house caroling. Some homes would invite them in for hot tea, coffee cake, or pastries. In his book, The Volga Germans, Fred Koch beautifully captures the spirit of the Volga German Christmas. Despite environmental austerity, absence of commercialism, and apathy toward material objects, Christmas was a joyous season in the colonies. Its social and religious purpose animated the community as it does in few Christian climates today. The sense of the holiday was captured in its spiritual essence rather than its ostinations. Okay, so I would like to note some parallels to the above explanation of traditions that I experienced growing up in a very large Lutheran church in the 1970s. I do recall my mother making our Christmas dresses each year. We probably had new shoes, and our hair was all done up with ribbons and clips. I remember going to church with my grandparents on Christmas Eve. Everything was sparkly and looked so pretty in the dim lights of the evening. There would be a Christmas pageant where the children's choir would sing and act out the nativity. My favorite part was the little baby Jesus. I think one year it was an actual live baby, but most years it was a doll. My most prominent memory is standing next to my grandmother as she sang her heart out. She sang with such enthusiasm, as mentioned above. She sang loud and proud. I remember thinking she didn't have a great singing voice. It was kind of shrill, but I wasn't embarrassed because she was so into it. My favorites were Away in a Manger, O Tannenbaum, and of course, Silent Night in German. As we left the church, the excitement of the evening was just getting started. We received our brown paper lunch sack of goodies. Our goodies included an apple or an orange, a few walnuts or peanuts, a box of raisins, or a box of animal cookies, and small wrapped candies, or even a Hershey's bar. Next, we would go to my grandparents' house or my aunt's house, and there would be a table full of treats that included German sausage, ham, salami, bread rolls, potato salad, chips and dips, bread and butter pickles, kuga, and cookies, cookies, cookies. Oh, I must not forget the giant bowl of black olives that we children would put on the tips of all of our fingers. The flocked artificial tree always had blue glass bulbs and a light with 4 color panels that shined on the tree. The fireplace would be burning, and surrounding the mantel and mirror above it would be what seemed like hundreds of Christmas cards that had been exchanged by family and friends near and far. We would gaze at the table for what seemed like hours, stuffing our bellies with as many goodies as we liked. I did not have many memories of gifts. There was never a lot, but one Christmas, when my sister and I were quite small, maybe 5 and 7 years old, Grandma gave us each a life-sized doll. And I mean those dolls were as tall as we were. Each doll had a suitcase filled with baby blankets and clothes, which my grandmother mostly made by hand. I do recall other handmade gifts over the years from both of my grandmothers, and I myself have enjoyed giving handmade gifts to family and friends over the years. Our families did not stay up until midnight like a lot of families do. We would probably head home around 9 p.m. My siblings and I could not wait to get to sleep, as we were expecting Santa to bring us gifts overnight. Christmas was and still is such a magical time of year. I sure would like to hear about your holiday traditions in the Germans from Russia community. I have become aware that I may have a listener in Canada. I don't know anyone in Canada, so I would like to hear from you too. If you have any stories to share, that is what I'm here for, so please reach out. I hope you have the merriest of Christmas and a very happy New Year. I'll post my next episode on January 4th. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to the Germans from Russia experience. I hope that something you heard today will inspire you to learn anything and everything you can about your own ancestors. If you like what you heard today, please leave a review, like, and share this podcast. If you comment directly by emailing me at thegrexperience@gmail.com. Also, like my Facebook page, the Germans from Russia Experience Podcast. Please see my show notes about this episode and for website suggestions to begin or continue your discovery of your Germans from Russia roots. My podcast artwork is by Matt Wall. My producer is Annie Anderson.